Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear us? Okay, great. Good to be here. A few weeks back, Vijay and I were deliberating. We talk often about digital transformation aspects, various topics related to it, and we were deliberating the impact of digital transformation on people involved downstream. Such an important topic, usually left between the fine print whenever you read a lot of materials on digital transformation. As practitioners, we've been involved in a few transformation initiatives in the region. We felt we had something valuable to share, and we said, okay, let's share at the next XConf. Now, as speakers, when we come to share a topic like this in front of you, we have to ask ourselves two questions. First is, why here, right? Amongst all of you, we could easily segment you into two kinds of people. One set would be the decision makers who are driving transformation in your organization. So you need to be aware of what to watch out for. The other set are people who are going to be impacted, which would be the vast majority of you. So you need to know what's going to hit you when your organization undertakes digital transformation. The second question that we need to ask ourselves is, why now, right? Is it even relevant? And for that, I'm just going to start with stats, right? Few years back, digital transformation was a buzzword. You had most of the organization coming and saying, hey, we are undertaking a big transformation program, blah, blah, blah. But what really happened is COVID came, gave a big nitro boost to all of it, right? And today, if you go to most of the leaders, they have stopped talking about digital transformation as a standalone initiative. It has become a digital-first strategy for them. And a vast majority of them, as you can see from the stats, are continuing to invest in it, right? Which means it's all the more relevant, all the more important, and it's fused into how an organization starts to think about strategy today. Okay, so it is relevant. But if it is so important and so relevant, the stats are alarming. About 70% of them do not meet their stated objectives, right? They fail. They usually have a small success during the pilot phase, but when it comes to scaling, often they do not meet what they set out to do, right? You won't hear from the failures because there's always someone involved, their promotions involved, but you can actually feel it in the organization. The initial boost disappears. Now, if we have to look at how to make these programs very successful, and if it's so important in today's world when digital first is a strategic imperative, we need to understand what causes it to fail, right? What are the common causes? And looking at stats again, it's very, very important to realize, and if you can actually see the slides, I don't know if you can read the fine print, but effectively what it says is most transformation programs fail during scaling, or they stall during scaling. And the reasons for that is overwhelmingly people, culture, capabilities related. And I'll give you all a moment to sink it in, because we don't talk about technology here. We don't talk about the direction in which you are undertaking your digital transformation, right? Those are important, but far more important are the people aspects, right? Because that's where it fails. Now, having said that, we'll have to take a deep dive into, how can team help when it comes to digital transformation success. Over to you, Vijay.
Thank you, Shyam. So, yeah, we said that digital transformation is not an option today anymore, but the fact is a lot of them are failing beyond the pilot or just, fizzling out, right? So how can the teams really help? So teams are essentially just a group of people, right? So what's different with the way teams need to be set up for a transformation to work? Let's look at that. So I think before getting into our topic, which is outcome-driven teams, right? Let's try to understand the levers for a successful digital transformation. So I think the first aspect that we need to think about that we miss a lot is the mindset in the organization. So if you look at any organization, the mindset of the leadership plays a big role in how the organization behaves. So if the leaders are very risk-averse, you'll see that the organization is always the follower. They'll never be the ones doing anything new and trend-setting. They'll be just waiting for everybody else to do it. Everybody else makes all the mistakes. And then when it's business as usual, they're like, okay, we also need to do it, right? So with digital transformation, given that it's really transformational or fundamentally changing the way you work, we have to have the right mindset. So how can you have the right mindset? The first thing would be to stop thinking about, oh, how much is the money I'm spending and how much is the immediate benefit. Start looking at, okay, you have to make money out of things, but there has to be a customer value from what you're doing, whether it's to your end customer who's buying your products or it's your internal customer. You have to think about what are they benefiting out of this? Why are we doing this, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is around the experimentation culture itself. So with transformation, we know that everything we do, it's never always right? We all make mistakes in our personal life. So as an organization, which is a group of people, it's even more, right? So you should embrace the fact that we do make mistakes. So what does an experimentation culture mean? It means that we fail fast, right? We make mistakes, but we build an environment that we don't spend too much time or too much money to realize if something is wrong. So we try something out, we build a hypothesis that something should work and help a customer in a particular way. We build it out, test it out. If it fails, okay, we say, we learned a lesson, what do we need to do to pivot and move on, right? The third aspect is around the responsiveness. So as an organization, if you have so heavy processes and stuff that are going to hinder you every time we need to make a change, you're not going to be able to respond quickly enough. So responsiveness is whether a customer is asking for something new or a competitor is forcing you to do something new, or something like COVID, where we didn't even anticipate that we have to just not go out and make our business work, right? So that's one aspect, having the right mindset. The second aspect is about ownership and empowerment. So as human beings, we contribute more to something if we feel that this belongs to us, right? We have a sense of belonging, we have a sense of ownership. If I tell you, you do this thing and you do this thing, and you're like, okay, my boss told me to do this, I'm just going to do it, right? But what we want to do is have people understand what are they actually building this for, what are they doing something for, so that they have the right level of empowerment and ownership. So now let's go into a little more detail, right? Why we need the empowerment and ownership. So the transformation, any simple transformational activity is not simple, right? There's speed with which it has to be done and the magnitude of changes which need to happen, and they need to happen in sync, right? So the whole orchestration cannot be done by just a group of people working on their individual pieces. They actually have to work together to make sure that the handoff is successful and they help each other to reach the goal. So what is uniting all those people? It's the outcome that they're working towards, not the output, right? So let's get into a little more detail of what that means, right? So in a traditional organization, we have people who are essentially resources that are working towards a set of outputs. So for example, front-end developers, right? They're told, we need to make these changes to our screens. Back-end devs are told, we need to write these new APIs or jobs because it has to be. But there's really no connection, right, between what people are doing. So as a result, you're just delivering those outputs that you were told by somebody to do, but your link with what is the outcome you're building it towards is very tenuous, right? So let's take an example, right? If we are talking about an organization decides that we want to enable online payments for our customers, right? So what are the things we need to do? We probably need to make some website changes. We need to do some back-end changes, some training for the customer service people, mailers sent out to customers by marketing. All these are the various outputs that need to happen, right? So in a typical setup, we are just told, you do this, you do this, you do this, and it will all fit together, right? And so I'm doing this because my boss told me, right? And he was told by his boss. But at the end of it, I don't know what's the outcome I'm driving towards. So what we are saying in the outcome-based approach is that we flip it, right? We tell this group of people, like we talked about in our example, customer service, marketing, front-end, back-end, right? We tell them that the outcome we want is that we want to increase, say, online payment capability by X%, right, in this year. So then they know what are the pieces that need to be done, but they can orchestrate it much better to get you probably even a better result. Because as by default, the people who are closest to a problem know the problem best, right? So if you tell them what problem you need to solve, they can actually come up with solutions that are a lot more meaningful than you saying, I think you doing this is going to fix the problem, right? So that's what we are trying to say with an outcome-driven team. So it really increases the sense of ownership and also the quality of the outcome that you get. The other thing I wanted to quickly touch up on was the cascading ownership. So when I gave the example of an online payment, it's not a one-off thing that one team has to do, right? It's tracking back to the organization's vision and strategic objectives. So what we're trying to show here is that everything that you do as an individual on a team should be mappable back to what the overall vision and objective of the organization is. So going back again to the payment example, our strategic objective might be that we want to become a much more efficiently run business so that we can reduce costs to our customers, for example, as a bank, right? And the goals are then derived out of it to say, okay, in this year, let's look at the things that cause a loss of operational efficiency. And one of them was probably how we collect payments, right? So that cost ends up getting passed to customers in most situations. So we are saying, okay, if the goal is that we want to become more operationally efficient, the objective, then the goal can be that this year, let's make online payments very easy, right, for customers to do, so that we reduce the cost of collections. And then that's the initiative that a team would be given, make these changes so that we can actually get this operational. The other thing that we need to look at with the outcome-driven teams is that we as individuals human beings don't do well with multitasking, right? If you have two very different things to juggle, you end up doing a pretty bad job in both of them, right? So what we want to do is focus the outcome-driven teams on a specific outcome. So what does that mean? In our example, where we said operational efficiency is one of the things that we are driving towards, we don't want the same team to also be responsible for another outcome, which is, for example, we want to increase revenue by X amount. So then, if you have a team that's responsible both for reducing cost as well as increasing revenue, they need to prioritize what's more important, and probably the solutions are not good in both the situations, right? They do the bare minimum to satisfy both of them. So we need to focus teams on one outcome at a time and get them to build it out. And as we said, we want to do a quick and simple solution that will realize the value that we're looking for. All right, so now let's see, now that we have these outcome-driven teams, how do we actually set them up for success?
Okay. Now what Vijay told is the construct of, how do we set the teams up for success? And there is a psychological aspect, right? Which is, if someone comes and says, do it, we won't do it. But if someone says, I'm going to measure you for doing it, our behavior changes. So there's a saying, right? People behave as they are measured. So I want you all to take a moment to see this sentence, right? Because this is what we tell the leaders, right? You expect teamwork, but you reward individual performance, right? This is very, very contradictory, right? Because there are people who take one for the team, who take a step back, and how are you recognizing their contribution? How are you incentivizing that behavior? Because if we all have to work together, just like the fingers in the hand, everything can't be equal sized. We won't be able to lift a thing, right? So to motivate people to behave in a certain way, we need to make sure that they're measured in the right way, and those metrics are sort of discussed with them, which encourages the right behavior. Now, when our clients come and ask us, we have over a period of time come to realize there are 4 common attributes that are relevant during a transformation effort in an organization. And for outcome-driven teams, we feel these 4 attributes are important to look at, right? Usually what gets measured is the role skills, right? You are a product owner, you are measured on how well you do that job. You are a technical lead, you are measured on how well you do that job. That's evident, right? However, as an outcome-driven team, you need to start with, are we getting to the outcomes that we want? How effective are we at getting there? So there is a customer satisfaction angle, right? Now this customer could be an external end customer, or if you're an internal facing team, it could be an internal customer for you, right? And there is an aspect of satisfying them that goes to which is directly linked to the outcome that you're setting out to do. Second is the business value. How efficiently are we doing it, right? No point in achieving the outcome, but making sure that you burn in the process, right? So that aspect of the business value that you add also need to be looked at. Now, the last dimension that is often underlooked in a transformation is the effort that people put in to change, right? There is an aspect of unlearning that happens. Until yesterday, I behaved in a certain way, I operated in a certain way, and today, I, as a team member, am taking efforts to change. I'm taking steps to uplift my fellow team member, boost up capability, and those are very, very important considerations, right? We need to be able to look at the efforts that one needs to put into that, recognize it, and also measure. Now, if you look at these 4 broad attributes, the second question that you might be asking is, hey, are all of these universally true? And are all of these equally weighted, right? Universally applicable from our experience, broadly we can say yes. Equally weighted, no, because different roles, again, have different levels of responsibility in making it happen, and I'll illustrate that with an example. A few years back, I was part of a transformation initiative. Vijay was also involved, and we also happened to work with one of the largest clients in this part of the world, which is in Thailand. And when the organization was going through the digital transformation, we had a seed team which went through first. And the problem that they were working on was a case of top-up loans, wherein they'll go to a credit-worthy customer and basically extend more loans to them. Now, this was done in a very manual fashion with call center people calling, and the take-up rate was only about 25%. The objective here is this team was, they had their eyes on this problem. They knew they had to solve it because it was operationally inefficient to do so. But I'm not getting into how they solved the problem. I'm getting into the aspect of how we ended up setting these 4 attributes of their measurement. And if you notice, there are 2 different roles that I've called out just to highlight the differences. One of the product owner, where the product owner has a lot more responsibility towards the customer satisfaction, the business outcomes, simply because that person's day-to-day job involved in deciding what to build, and how to meet the stated objectives. Whereas the tech lead on the team, now mind you, this team was going through a digital transformation initiative, which meant they were adopting newer ways of working, newer tech stack, newer architectural patterns. Basically, the tech lead played an important role in uplifting the fellow team members because they were a seed team, right? They had to show how it needs to be done in the new way. And there was a lot more emphasis on their role skills as well as the L&D contribution to the fellow team, right? Now you can see that none of the parameters are 0, right? For example, product owner also had a certain percentage of their evaluation towards L&D, and tech lead also had a certain percentage of their evaluation on customer satisfaction and business outcome, right? Now this is important because when a product owner, let's say, takes a myopic decision, tech lead has skin in the game to go and say, hey, you know what? I don't see eye to eye with your decision making. Can you explain why you think this is relevant, right? So the team tends to keep each other in check, right? Simply because we put attributes of measurement along the individuals, but across all of these 4 different attributes. Now, the success case, right? While we set these up and we told the team new ways of working, the end state was phenomenally successful, right? In a traditional setting, if we had just measured them on role skills, product owner would have been focused on building the most flashy product with a big bang. Tech lead might have been focused on going all out on the newest possible tech stack, not really linking it up to is there an ROI on doing things right. But with the team measured across these 4 and setting their sights on the outcome, they knew the success of this initiative was customer reach, right? We reached only 25% of the customers in the past. How do we increase that? Second, it's not important just to reach them. The uptake of the loans is also important. So they set an additional criteria to measure themselves on it. And how are we going to go about doing it is by modernizing the platform and improving the overall cycle time involved in the process, which they actually did phenomenally well, right? Now, this team, simply by setting themselves up for the right kind of metrics, setting their outcomes right, and with the right level of empowerment from the leadership, because leadership had to bless all of these changes, mistakes were made, team had to learn, unlearn new ways of doing, and they had to have the room to make it all happen. With the right setting, they were able to achieve stellar results. Now, if we take one more step forward, right? Now, what happened in this team, if we had to scale it across the organization, we will have to actually go into, what makes it tick. And usually change management comes to rescue because large transformation program always has an element of change management involved in it. Our emphasis as practitioners is that there needs to be a joint activity. Gone are the days when your change management activity was a top-down, one-way thinking. It largely still needs to be starting at the top, but you need to have a feedback mechanism where you understand what the downstream people who are actually going through the change feel about it, right? Which meant the metrics that I flashed didn't come on day one with someone deciding, okay, this is how I'm going to measure the team against, right? There was a bit of a dialogue with some of the key people in the team to say, we're going to set this up, see if this adds up to, whether it lends to the right kind of behavior. And we observed it for the C team and then evolved it into what needs to happen for the next team, right? And the organization needs to have this constant dialogue as a change is rolled out throughout and across the teams. We recommend, looking at 4 different aspects of change. This is not a formal framework by any means, but these are the various considerations that we've just represented in a honeycomb. Traditional change management looks at the big question of what is in it for me, right? If I have to make you change to a different way of behaving, I'm going to ask and answer the question of why should I change? What is in it for me, right? That's a question you'll ask me and I need to answer that. And if we get down to the next level, obviously what changes, what is a to-be state that needs to go through is usually explained. What we encourage is to think 2 more layers deep. One, you are going to, for most part, use the existing people that you have, which means you need to have an assessment of how ready are my people? How are they feeling about it? What are the competencies and skills and behaviors that I value in the change state? And how do I communicate it very explicitly to my existing people? Give them room to change. And I, as a leader, what do I enable, right? What kind of fundamental structures do I put in place? What kind of training, support mechanism do I have for my people to go through this change, right? And most importantly is the last one on the right, which is there are a few people who are going to take the first step towards making this change, right? They are going out of their way, out of their comfort zone to say, okay, you want it, I'm going to behave differently. How are you going to recognize these people and reward them, right? Because change always cascades like a snowball. The first set of seed champions are far more important to learn from and to recognize. And it's very, very important that you, if you are a leader involved in digital transformation, you think through as you roll out the change. And if you are a downstream person, you may think about making the incentive, go have an open dialogue with your bosses to say how the change impacts you and how you feel about it. That transparent feedback mechanism is essential, whether you are a leader or if you are a participant. So, in summary, most of the transformation programs are complex. The challenges come during scaling, and most of the problems that incur are people and culture related. Outcome-driven teams are a key differentiator in getting this change happen. And you get the team's commitment by setting them up for the outcome, giving them the line of sight, and making sure that you recognize team contributions as opposed to just rewarding individual contributions alone. And scaling it across, think through a right kind of change mechanism that incorporates feedback and learning along the way.